This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. David Schemm, State Executive Director of the Kansas Farm Service Agency, begins the show as he recaps program payouts for 2025 and highlights the recently announced state committee. The show continues with K-State veterinary entomologist Cassandra Olds discussing lice on cattle in the winter and reminders for effective control. Part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast concludes the show as Brad White, Bob Larson, and Phillip Lancaster chat about their feelings on the quality of udders on cattle. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Wednesday show hearing from the State Executive Director of the Kansas Farm Service Agency, David Schemm. David, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Shelby.
David, wanting today to talk first on farm programs through the Farm Service Agency, and what have we been seeing so far?
You know, kind of looking back, Shelby, and kind of recapping this area. So again, for all of our listeners out there, FSA kind of covers two big areas. Obviously, one is farm programs, and a lot of those programs that are either come through the Farm Bill, or obviously some of them can be disaster or ad hoc programs that are either put into place by the administration or passed by Congress. Then other side then again is the farm loan side portfolio there. But just talking specifically about our farm programs, I guess what I wanted to share with some of our listeners out there and producers obviously is when we look at this past year and the impact that FSA had on the state there, you know, it's always amazing to me that truly, you know, how vital obviously ag and our producers, our grain farmers, our ranchers are out there to the economy here in Kansas. But when we look at this past year, again, I'm talking about a calendar year for us. So this past year in 2025, many of our producers are familiar with the ARC and PLC payments there. Of course, as we remember, those payments are always delayed. So in other words, the payments for 2025 will be made in October of 2026. But this last year, we paid out in ARC PLC payments $115 million to our producers across the state. When we're talking a little bit more about conservation and a lot of different conservation areas, but obviously the big one is CRP. You know, we paid out $76 million in CRP rental payments this last year, amounting to a little over 2 million acres there across the state. You know, a big one, and again, I know a lot of producers definitely saw some of this, is our ECAP, you know, money that went out there. Kansas, we sent out $730 million there on just the ECAP program there. The Livestock Disaster Program, ELRP, that was sent out a little over $100 million there. And of course, you know, obviously, one of the big programs that definitely affected our state here for disasters that occurred in 23 and 24 was the SDRP program. And, you know, we sent out over $640 million on that program there. And obviously, we've also have a stage 2 going on. I guess some total, Shelby, Kansas FSA in this past calendar year, 2025, sent out almost $1.8 billion to our producers across the state this last year. So obviously a significant amount of money there to be able to help producers in challenging situations. Some of it, you know, possibly price related, some of it disaster related, but ways that we've been able to try to make sure that we can help our family producers out there.
And you mentioned one of the ways sometimes we get farm programs is through ad hoc disaster programs. And for those programs to be established or made notable to Kansas producers, is that you sharing that we've had a disaster in Kansas, or how do they go, this is a disaster, let's see if we can do something for our farmers?
So, you know, it's a lot of different ways, you know, obviously input and some of the same data that we rely on FSA, Shelby, whether it's drought that obviously affected there or possibly, you know, excessive heat or various things like that can affect the producers. You know, it's also data that is relied upon, you know, as far as crop insurance claims that were paid out there that affected there. So, as these programs are developed here, definitely that is a lot of data there. When we're looking at a little bit more specific data, whether it's a significant hailstorm or fire or tornado that goes through producers' ground or whatever, all the dynamics that get damaged there. We have those various disaster programs that can help those, Shelby, there. So again, it's a little bit of a process, but it's all about grassroots, and that's what even our county committees, that's why we have county offices, and we've even got local, what we call county emergency boards there that comprise, our county director, other stakeholders within that county, extension, various things like that. So when these disaster events occur, those people are meeting, looking at the damage that's occurred with whatever disaster, seeing the programs that it qualifies for, and then obviously reaching us up to us here at the state office. And I'm part of a state emergency board that evaluates those and makes sure we elevate those on up to the secretary, so that if it does need a secretarial or even at certain times presidential disaster declarations, we make sure that we get those declarations signed and back here to let the producers take opportunity to utilize those disaster programs that triggered by that.
And one program producers might currently be looking at, the Bridge Assistance Program. And can you remind us about what is that program for our producers?
So, I know this was a lot of focus, especially as we rounded out this last calendar year, a lot of producers, a lot of interest in what a payment rate by commodity per acre was for this. And that essentially sums up what this program was about, Shelby. This program was basically specifically designed by President Trump and Secretary Rawlins to be able to address truly that lack of trade that we've seen underneath the previous administration and that has impacted the prices that these producers have seen so much. So, the big ones, again, I've noted before, but corn was $44.36 an acre. Cotton was $117.35. Soybeans was $30.88. Sorghum was $48.11. Wheat was that $39.35. So that's a per acre there based upon planted acres there. So again, producers will be seeing these pre-filled forms show up here. We're definitely looking at February there, these forms to start showing up probably a little bit later in the month. But as the secretary said, come February 28th, we're going to be authorized to start to make payments on those sign-up applications and get those payments out to the producers very shortly thereafter. So again, from a producer standpoint, be watching the email when the application shows up. Go into your county office, get the application signed and turned into them. So that way, when we can start issuing payments, we can get that done, Shelby.
And last time, David, we talked about state committees and people going to be being named to that state committee. And you have their names and a little biography to share with us today.
Truly am excited there. Important role that a state committee makes. Just a brief overview. State committee is a political appointed by the secretary position. So the secretary makes these appointments there. Been a lot of work gone in to make sure we get these leaders in their community, in the state, identified and on this committee. And I'm definitely excited to be working with this committee. So yes, 5 people sit on the state committee to review, appeals, relief cases, as well as making determinations on policies that affect Kansas and what the best route is to make sure that our producers are getting the service that they need. So Daniel Atkinson is our chair. He is from Stockton. He is an owner-operator of a crop and livestock operation producing wheat, sorghum, corn forage, and registered commercial Angus cattle in Rooks and Graham counties. He is also the former chairman of the National Sorghum Producers, where he led federal policy engagement. Kathy Claiborne is from Fredonia. She is the co-owner of an ag operation producing wheat, corn, soybeans, hay, includes a cow-calf herd in Wilson and Woodson County. And she has also served as vice chair for the Wilson and Woodson FSA County Committee for us. Craig Froschner, he is from Larned. He is the owner-operator of a diversified operation of about 700 cow-calves, backgrounding yard, and also a crop production that includes wheat, corn, soybeans, and sorghum. He has also served as president for the Pawnee County Cooperative Board and past president for the Pawnee County Fair Board. Tyler Hands is from Garden City. He's a 5th-generation farmer. and also the owner-operator of a diversified irrigated and dryland crop operation. He oversees daily farm activities, planning, marketing, budgeting, financial reporting, and long-term strategy. And then our fifth member is Clayton Janicki from Bird City. Janicki, he's owner-operator of a farm operation focusing on alfalfa, corn, wheat, and sorghum in Cheyenne County, practicing sustainable practice. He's also a former petroleum engineer who returned to manage the family farm and expand the forage operation. So, again, Dan Atkinson, Kathy Claiborne, Craig Forshner, Tyler Hands, and Clayton Janicki, and sure excited to have them on our state committee and looking forward to working with them.
Do you see value in that committee having some diversity of what their involvement is in agriculture?
Absolutely. It's great to see them. It's neat. We've got, people from across the state, obviously, west to east, representing, obviously, very diversified agriculture that we have across the state, as well as experiences there, on national boards engaged in various policy things, obviously on local boards as well. But obviously, every single one of these are very strong leaders, and very excited to see them being able to bring their own experiences that they have had, and to be able to truly come in here and provide the leadership for our producers out there to make sure that we got programs that we're effectively delivering for our producers. Absolutely, Shelby. It's good to have them on there and have that breadth of experience that they have.
David, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you, Shelby. Always good to visit.
That was State Executive Director of the Kansas Farm Service Agency, David Schemm. If you're wanting to find more information from FSA, you can do so by going to your local service center or by going online to Farmers.gov. We're cutting to a short break now, but stick around because we have more for you up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show talking about lice with K-State veterinary entomologist Cassandra Olds. Cassandra, thanks for joining us today.
Very excited to talk about lice.
Cassandra, when are lice most active?
So, we normally think about our pest control with our livestock as a summer issue, but really lice are most active during winter. And this is because if you think about your animal, it's got a nice thick coat. That coat gives insulation. In summer, the coat hair is short, the sun is beating down on the animal, and so it's really, really hot. Whereas in winter, you get this nice insulating layer, temperatures are cooler, solar radiation isn't as high, and it's just a perfect environment. So what we see is whereas our ticks and our flies are most active during summer, our lice, although present during summer, are not in their active expansion stage of their yearly life cycle. And that happens during the cooler winter months.
How might a producer be able to tell that their livestock is uncomfortable?
Yeah, so lice are itchy. And so there's two types of lice. There's the chewing lice, which chew on the animal's fiber, the hair fiber, and birds get lice too, so it could be the feathers. And then there's sucking lice, which directly tap into the blood vessel and have a blood meal. And so these two different biologies are important when we talk about control, which we'll do in a little bit. And so both the chewing on the hair fiber and also the taking of the blood meal causes significant irritation. And so what you will normally see is an animal is itchy. And so they will be rubbing on a fence pole. They will be rubbing on tree stumps. They will be trying to scratch themselves if they've got horns. If you're not observing the animals, you can also just see signs of this in your equipment, right? Do we have a lot of fences that are down? Do we have hair if you've got a barbed wire fence? Do we have a lot of hair caught up in those spirals? Itching and then that also results in hair loss. And so if you get sort of patchy areas where the hair is fallen out, that's often a sign that there's something wrong. And especially, as we think in winter, if you get large hair loss, this can be an issue for thermoregulation. So those are kind of your key signs that there may be something wrong. And then if you can put the animal into a chute and you can comb through the hair, you can see them crawling around. They're small. They're about the same size as human head lice, so very small. but completely different species. And sometimes you need a bit of a flashlight to see them, but you will see lice active on the animal.
Are there certain places that the lice prefer to suck and get their food from?
Yeah, and so it really depends on the species. So there's different species of lice. So cattle lice doesn't want to be on a goat, and goat lice doesn't want to be on a horse. So they're fairly species specific. But then they also have areas where they tend to be more specific. So some of them like the tail head, some of them like the head. But in Kansas, the lice that we care about mostly is a general body lice. And you can search along the sort of the top line of the animal, and you should be able to find it there, especially up in that neck region where the hair is a little bit thicker.
Do producers need to identify whether it's chewing lice or sucking lice?
Yes. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky because it comes into what we treat with. And so if you have a nice, good phone, and what you can do is you can put the lice into ethanol to kill them, rubbing alcohol. And then you take a nice zoomed in picture. And so it's really the head shape is going to tell you which one you've got. If you've got sort of a really big dome-shaped head, the head looks big and round, that is a lice that chews the hair. And the problem where we get lost with this is a lice that chews on the hair. If you give an ivermectin injectable, for example, that's not going to help you with chewing lice because the chewing lice doesn't feed on the blood. Now, an ivermectin pour-on, you're okay with. So it just really goes to make sure that you tailor your kind of which lice species you have. Now, if the head is long and narrow, then that is a sucking lice that feeds on the blood. And so then you can use a pyrethroid pour-on, you can use an ivermectin pour-on or an injectable ivermectin. We generally try and stick with the pour-ons, though, versus an injectable.
Do livestock usually have both types of lice or just one, or how does that usually work out?
Yeah, they can have multiple species at the same time. For the most case, if it's a younger animal, it may be a sucking lice. The sucking lice that we have in cattle, at least, are primarily an issue in calves, whereas as an adult animal, if you get lice, it's normally going to be a chewing lice. However, our other livestock, can have both at any given time. It really just depends on the species of livestock. But you can have multiple species of lice on the same animal.
When we're thinking about those sucking lice where they're getting that blood meal, do you have to worry about any transfer of diseases from one livestock to another?
That is a very, very, very good point. So we worry about this mostly in terms of Theileria orientalis. We have data that shows that because they take a blood meal, if lice moves from an infected animal to an uninfected animal, that it can transmit it. It's very, very understudied. And so they're not as effective as ticks, because a tick takes the blood meal in and it replicates in the tick, and it basically is like, if I get 5 parasites coming in, I get 50 coming out. Whereas a lice, it's just contamination of the mouth parts. And so if I pick up one, I can maybe give one. So there's no amplification in the lice itself. But yes, and so this is primarily an issue in younger animals, calves. We tend not to get the species of lice which transmits Theileria in our older animals. They're just resistant to it by the time they reach adulthood. And so that's sort of our main concern, something to be on the lookout for. Now, you need a fairly high lice burden for this to occur. So no need to panic. If you've got regular levels of lice, you're probably okay. But to be thinking of it, when we bring new animals in, young animals in, we want to treat those as they come in, even though it's winter.
And when those are getting treated, is it important to maybe go ahead and quarantine them until that treatment time is up?
Yes. And so this is the important thing to know for lice. So when you give a pour-on and you look at the back, and so number one, only use products that are registered for lice control. And it will say, especially for our sort of our pyrethroid products or ivermectins that don't contain an insect growth regulator, that you have to treat twice. So it will say treat once and then 2 weeks later treat again. This is because any lice that were laid as eggs are resistant to the treatment. The egg is really good. It has an outer casing which protects it against the chemical. So you have to wait for those to hatch out and then kill those the second time before they've reached sexual maturity to be able to lay more eggs. So you have to treat twice to break that life cycle. If you only treat once, you're reducing the lice population, but you're not eliminating it. So that's very important. The only exception to this is if there is an insect growth regulator in the product, because then it will go through, the female will take up the product and it will pass through to the eggs. So just always read your product guidelines. And if it says treat twice, 14 days apart, treat twice, 14 days apart.
While we're talking about treatments and how to kill this lice, if you're using those chemicals, is it important to rotate them year from year?
Yes. As with our flies, as with everything else, we do not want to use the same product year after year after year after year. So I would always say stick in your rotation plan, right? If you're in a pyrethroid year for flies, use your pyrethroid for your lice. We don't have as many products available for lice as we do, for example, for flies. And also because it's winter, right? We try and stick to things that are, for example, a pour-on just for the animals. We can't be drenching our animals in sort of a spray or something like that. So our products are a little bit more limited. But yes, you do want to rotate your chemical class annually. So for this winter, use a pyrethroid, for example. Next winter, go ahead and swap that out to, for example, a pour-on ivermectin.
For those lice going from one animal to the next, are they just jumping across?
Yeah, so lice don't have wings. Their ancestors had wings, but they do not have wings. And so they require direct transfer from one animal to another animal. So this means animals bumping up to each other, which is, again, why it's important if you have a lousy animal to quarantine it and keep it separate from the other animals while the product is killing off all those lice. Because if you just treat it and put it back in, it's still giving lice to everybody else. So much like we keep our kids home from school for a day or two when they've got a lice issue, we want to keep our livestock separated out so that they don't bump up against everybody else and transfer it. Now, as humans, we do not need to worry about the lice that our livestock have. If you have a high lice burden, and we see this especially with poultry, you can get a little bit of irritation on your hands and stuff like that because the lice are a little bit confused initially, but we cannot support the life cycle for livestock lice. We have our own lice that we support just fine.
Cassandra, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Wonderful. Happy to be here as always.
That was K-State veterinary entomologist Cassandra Olds. If you'd like to read more on this topic, you can do so by checking out a recent Beef Tips news article, which you can find at ksubeef.org, or I will also link it in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we have more for you up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Wednesday show with part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast with Brad White, Bob Larson, and Phillip Lancaster.
How important is udder quality to the commercial cow producer? And should I use udder quality or some metric or gauge or scoring system to cull cows?
Yeah, as someone who remembers having to deal with cows that had, kind of big balloon teats, difficult for the calf to get a hold of, those types of, no producer, no calf wants to deal with a cow with poor udder quality. And so is it a problem? Yeah, it can be a problem. The main thing is, I think, as a producer, I'm not very patient with that. And a lot of times, this is my experience anyway, she might have really poor udder quality at the beginning of lactation. And then by the time we're weaning that calf, that udder starts to look pretty good. And so I need to make sure that I remember that cow and not give her the chance to make another heifer. And I might not, I wouldn't say might. I'm not going to keep her heifer. That is so frustrating to have to deal with a poor quality udder early in life for a calf.
So you think they're hereditary?
I do think it's hereditary. I do think it's
hereditary. What is the heritability of udder quality or udder? Now, scoring is difficult because it's subjective,
and scoring at what time? So a lot of times we're making our selection at the time the heifer is, not that far from puberty, and I don't trust my ability to predict how that. So I'm going to base it a lot on her dam, in that if her dam has good udder quality.
I'm not going to keep heifers out of cows that have bad udders.
So your question was how heritable is it?
It's not a selection. It's a culling criteria.
Yeah.
So you're taking the bottom off.
And I don't know how heritable it is, but it's enough that that's the way I behave.
Maybe. I don't know. So I agree with you but it's the occasional cow that will have, depending on your herd, your genetics, what you're dealing with. It's the occasional to rare cow that will have a big teat. And I'm not sure if there was something else that was going on.
So you're saying it could have been mastitis.
Could have been mastitis.
Injury.
I think we underestimate how often mastitis could happen in beef cattle because we're not milking them every day. We don't have the ability to observe it.
It's only never.
Yeah, try not to milk them ever. But it's only the very rare case that's severe that might be noticed or identified. So mastitis could have led to that. And I would not base, of all the things that I'm selecting heifers based on, udder quality would be so low as to be inconsequential on my heifer selection.
I agree, unless I had a problem with this.
You agree, unless you disagree. This kind of sounds like the most.
So I think that's right. There's something that happened to that cow, and so you got to take that into account. But I did a quick search, and a couple of websites cite the heritability of udder attachment around 0.2 to 0.3.
That's pretty.
And heritability of teat size at 0.5.
Wow, that's actually pretty hot.
Yeah. So there definitely could be something to it, but I think you got to take into account that if she had mastitis in that quarter or something else that happened that affected her, that's not a heritability. That's just
environment.
Yeah, environment.
But I don't know that I would know, and I agree that it makes sense that both those things are heritable because a lot of our physically expressed traits, musculoskeletal issues, are pretty highly heritable. So that makes sense. But how often are those teat size or udder attachment, I'll say, out of bounds?
Yeah, this is my opinion. I think the reason that I think you said it's not that high on your criteria is you didn't run into very many. I mean, you didn't have very many herds where your clients were really struggling with udders.
No.
And I would agree. And if a herd was struggling, I would then, in that case, put some selection pressure on the daughters out of cows that I had problems with. If I'm not having very many problems, it's not very high on my list of things to adjust. Yeah. So I think it really is a herd-by-herd basis.
Once again, that was part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast. You can listen to the full episode by following the link in today's show notes on agtoday.net or by searching for Cattle Chat on your favorite podcast platform. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.